Hi y'all ain't hit me all day. What the fuck is the problem? Is it me cause I'm not solved? I'm bored.
You know what's strange? Shingo Natsume, don't know if you heard of him, directed one of the most popular anime of all time, but no one talks about his style. Name one time people brought up Shingo Natsume when discussing great anime directors. I mean, you'll hear people go on and on about Hideaki Anno, Shinichiro Watanabe, and Masaki Yuasa. Hey, Shingo Natsume made One Punch Man Season 1. You know, the anime that perfectly adapts a manga that looks like this? While also being one of the most popular anime of all time, expanding the global recognition this art form now has. What's the deal with that? Dude, what are you talking about? Madhouse made that. Who's Shingo Natsume?
Omori,
Your ass is getting sent back to 2012.
Well, Omoriboy, I'm glad you asked. Hi, I'm Lucas, and I'm here to talk about why Shingo Natsume is one of the greatest anime directors working in the industry right now, and every single one of his works, except that one, are worth checking out. His distinct style is something I just want to bring to the surface so this man can get the recognition he deserves. Now, let's begin with part 1, the tweet.
One Punch Man tends to have the image of having a big budget, but that's not the case. It's just average. One Punch Man was made because of the passion and commitment of the animators participating, and the hard work of each section. Thank you for your continued support of the One Punch Man anime.
One quality that is present in all of Shingo Natsume's works, especially what defined him first and foremost in 2016, is the unnaturally high quality of the animation for the shows he's first worked on, Space Dandy and One Punch Man. But as the tweet says, the budget or the money that is put into this project is not a determining factor of its quality. So what is? Well, at least the person who wrote that tweet, Chikashi Kubota, was put up to a pretty difficult task of keeping all the characters on model. In order to accurately animate the movement of muscle, the staff filled the studio with reference books and figures. The downside is that it made walking through the studio awkward when the whole area consisted of photos of flexing men wearing very little clothing. They received a few strange looks, and some people questioned what they were really working on.
As simplistic as Saitama is, he is a lot more difficult to draw than what we would think. His facial expressions are a difficult part of animating him. Because his face is so simple, if you make a mistake, it is so obvious. We were very careful to make sure his face was drawn very well.
You can't just throw money at a series to make it animate more, and the work that Natsume did at Madhouse looks surprisingly better compared to the other shows that were released under the same studio at the same time. So, to discover the secret sauce, we need to take a brief detour into Natsume's beginnings in the anime industry. Like a majority of those working in said industry today, he started off at the McDonald's fry cook position of anime creation, a key animator. But something about his early sakuga seemed to attract one esteemed director when he signed up for his show in 2011.
自分が初めてテレビシリーズの演出をやったのが湯浅さんの四畳半神話体系で、湯浅さんはもう絵作りというか、どうやって自分のカラーの作品を作るかとか、クリエイターなんだなって思わせてもらえたんですよね。そういう意味でも本当に一番情熱があった時期かもしれないですね。でも今見ると本当ひどいコンテでだなって思いますけどね。ちょっとカット割りも何もちぐはぐで、ちょっと絵的なそのシートを見る力もちょっと力不足っていう部分もあるんですけど、でも元気があってよかったなって思いますね。
His first director's role was an episode of the Tatambi Galaxy, the sixth one where Watashi goes on a wild date with Hanuki. Among the various interviews, he cites director Masaki Wasa as a prime influence, whose loose style adapts to the role he wants in his shows, known for storyboarding every single episode of the shows he works on, which is why I assume Natsume said they looked awful. Then there's Shinichiro Watanabe.
監督としてどうそのクリエイターをまああまり言葉が悪いんですけど、どうクリエイターを選んでどう配置していくかでどういう仕事をやらせるかっていうので、まさに監督ですよね。で音楽はこういうことがやりたいんだ。で絵はこういうことがやりたい。でキャストもこういうことなんだっていうなんかその企画自体をまとめる監督ってこういう感じなんだなっていうのはちょっと勉強になりましたね。そうですね。スペースダンディで自分の役割ですよね。渡辺慎一郎という大きな 山があってっていう感じですね。まあ、雑用ですね。渡辺真一の雑用をやってましたね。渡辺さんその企画の上の方の制作、アニメの上の方、シナリオとか見てもらって、自分はそのコンテから後の作業ですよね。ラッシュだったり、どういうふうに絵を作っていくかとか、どういうスタッフィングするとかっていうのを調整したりとかっていう感じでしたね。
In this case, I really want the interviews to speak for themselves, because I just found so many of them, and I really want to highlight them all. This is an excerpt from an interview with animator Bahi JD, who worked on Space Dandy. On Space Dandy, do you communicate a lot with Mr. Watanabe, or is that Mr. Natsume's job?
For episode 1, Natsume-san was the director, but everything I discussed with him was also forwarded to Watanabe-san, and I received both of their responses. You have to imagine there are so many individual creators on board Space Dandy. I think Natsume and Watanabe are doing a great job on maintaining a balance here. A bad director would impose limits on us and make us into animation robots in order to preserve the show's consistency. But Watanabe and Natsume let us go wild and free, and yet that balance still remains.
The ethos that created Space Dandy is one that One Punch Man also shares and is a core tenet of Natsume's styles. The ability to hand over the reins to the staff while keeping the production tied to a centralized vision. Him starting off as key animator is why he is so adept at managing the different levels of production, because he himself has had the experience with the duplicitous roles involved in the creation of anime in many different positions. He also just happened to be working alongside some of the greatest animators in the industry right now, so it's no surprise that when you've been in the industry for so long, you're bound to make some friends. Many fans noticed that a lot of the animation staff involved also worked together on the previous show, Space Dandy. Did you make an effort to keep in touch?
As far as the anime animators, the community is small. So even though we are working across different studios, we know each other, like recognizing names and faces. When we work on a production together, we put all our time, our blood, sweat, and tears in the production. So through that, we become friends and comrades, and I made sure to stay in touch. It just happened that a lot of us came together after previously working on Space Dandy. A lot of them are from the same age and generation as me, so it was easy to get along with everyone. It was a lot of fun to be there at the studio.
Another thing about the anime community, it's not that one studio producing the anime is really good. The truth is the animation community isn't tied to one studio. Most of them are freelance animators, so in the end, those animators are just borrowing those desks at the studio to work.
I think it's clear that the creation of a show like One Punch Man didn't simply materialize inside the Madhouse building with enough cash like some botched FMA transportation. Of course there was money involved, but it was a good manga that happened to be adapted by an A+ director off the heels of one of the most popular anime in the United States, Space Dandy, where most of the same staff from Space Dandy also worked on One Punch Man. Yeah, it's not a surprise that One Punch Man was a hit, especially off the coattails of the superhero boom in the mid-2010s that also launched My Hero Academia into mainstream popularity. It was clear to the people at Madhouse that Shingo Natsume was someone worth keeping around with the intent to let him keep making baller-ass shit. Animation producer Yuichiro Fukushi was there at every single one of Shingo Natsume's projects after One Punch Man, except for the Tommy Time Machine Blues, which is animated at Sign Saru. He was responsible for hooking Natsume up with the animators that made One Punch Man, since most of them, like Natsume himself, are freelance. Of course, the ones that were closest to him would be eager to work on his next project, such as veteran animators Toshiyuki Sato, Goisei Oda, and Keiichiro Saito. Wait, that's no veteran. That's the director of Bocchi the Rock and Fairy Beyond End. Yes, Omoriboy, that is correct. In fact, he has been involved in most of Natsume's projects, starting with the Aqua 13 OVA up to directing 2 episodes of Sonny Boy. It really goes to show how the anime industry breathes new life by evolving on the techniques created by their mentors. And like how Natsume was born through the teachings of Shinichiro Watanabe and Masaki Yuasa, Keiichiro Saito was born through the teachings of Shingo Natsume. Broadly speaking, okay, they weren't literally born, that'd be pretty gross. After One Punch Man, Shingo Natsume had time to create at least a couple really well done TV anime, and all, including One Punch Man, have a signature style and flavor that people might not be able to distinguish, unlike Miyazaki or the other bajillion directors I previously mentioned in this video. I mean, after the whole point of part 1 was to highlight the freedom given to the animators, allowing them to create something entirely divorced from someone who would be in the directorial position. But I see it. And maybe by the end of the video, you'll see it too. Part 2, the original anime. Of all the anime that Shingo Natsume have directed, Sonny Boy is by far the most Shingo Natsume-y of them all, which might sound weird to quantify for a director. This one has the most him in it. but you have to keep in mind that the rest of the show he's directed are adaptations. So objectively, a show that he's wrote is going to be more original to him than something someone else wrote. But it's not like Natsume could go into his atelier for 5 years to animate every single frame by hand. So let's go through a couple of his interviews to lay some groundwork. Very producer Motoki Mukaichi met Natsume for the first time during the preambles to Space Dandy, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he fell for him at first sight. And so, when their schedules aligned, he approached Natsume with a proposal to make. Anything at all. While Mukaichi had some specific details in mind, you know who to thank for the constant cliffhangers, since he suggested having one twist per episode to keep viewers hooked. His pitch to Natsume could be summarized with, anything goes, as long as you like it. Essentially a blank check, a gift that's hard to come by in this industry. Presented with that chance, Natsume did the obvious and took it. His diverse career had allowed us to see many sides of Natsume, even down to independent projects, but nothing can compare to the way Omoriboy lays him bare. His favorite artists and companions, his personal philosophical musings, all in service of depicting a singular worldview, his own. It's funny, at least for me, because there's this one interview that Natsume did with OtaQuest back in 2020, asking him what anime he would like to make, and he said,
ずっとやってみたいと思ってるのがやっぱりなんていうんですかね、子供向けというか少年少女の冒険ものっていうのはずっとやりたいなと思っていましたね。というのもやっぱり子供の頃からそういうグーニーズとか好きだったので、そういうのがやりたいな、子供が冒険して成長していく過程とかそういうのが描けたらいいなっていうのはありますかね。
Which is literally what Omoriboy is, so you could tell he had the show in mind for a pretty long time. You look around and the promotion to Omoriboy to these outlets is, Shingo Natsume is making an original anime! Approximately when did you begin to formulate the idea for Omoriboy? Is it a story that you've been thinking about for a long time, or were you suddenly inspired one day?
The proposal gave me a lot of freedom, and I tried to cram everything I wanted to express without holding back. I started thinking of the story when I was looking back on my work. I think it naturally took shape from there.
That response is interesting for me because his earlier works, at least in TV anime, are extremely dissimilar to Omoriboy in almost every level. What can be said is that Omoriboy itself can be compared to an adaptation of the thoughts within Natsume's head as much as the One Punch Man anime is of the manga, in the sense that the fictions that Natsume grew up reading found their way into Omoriboy. Which brings us to the story that Rajdhani told us in
One way to think about it is that it's rather like Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-5 and The Sirens of Titan, works that I myself like. Also maybe the SF novel Childhood's End, Arthur C. Clarke. Okay, people don't just speak with parentheses.
Interestingly, those aren't the only sci-fi novels that Natsume happened to be a fan of.
The structure of the film is based on the novel Great American Baseball, but with an overlap with the world in a different dimension. It's based on a novel called Flatland, the story of many dimensions. I actually tried to do it again in Space Dandy, in the episode written by To Enjo, episode 24. It's a story with a different dimension, and this time I tried to do it in a new and digested form.
Even the music seemed to be added to the series in a way that wasn't 100% intentional. Of course, the bands he wanted to sign on did, but the effect of their music couldn't be predicted even by Natsume himself. Sunset Roller Coaster's Let There Be Light Again, insert song for episode 6, also turned out to be a masterpiece. From episode 11, the amount of songs had increased. However, did you specifically demand songs and had them written for your needs?
There have been business meetings, but they were really rough. And then, in parentheses, laughs. Do I act that out? Well, there we go. I'm laughing right now. That works, maybe. I was explaining the different kinds of scenes and emotions the characters were going through, and had them read the scenarios and put in their creations, and when all was said and done, the pieces we got out of them were pitch perfect, so I let them work things out without uttering another word. I've mentioned this before, but even though we had business meetings, they completely ended up derailing, and so I was thinking that the meetings just weren't proceeding well, yet in the midst of all that, the compositions kept coming. So I figured that, as one would expect, artists really are strong on the emotional side. It truly was a marvelous experience.
I guess what I'm trying to explain, outside of showing off all these cool interviews, is that Sonnyboy was created no differently than any other Shingo Natsume anime. The elements of production are allowed to be both distinct while also combining into a satisfying whole, which is a little counterintuitive to the point I was originally making, but in a way, that's the result of working in teams, that the staff that work for you can't help but add their own work to the project they're working on. So, who is Shingo Natsume? Well, one would be better served by asking, who is Sonnyboy?
You really have somewhere you absolutely have to be? Or do you just not want to stick around out here and talk to me? Huh? Running away?
Are there any characters particularly reflective of your outlook or feelings during your own teenage years?
That would be Nagata. He might be a reflection of how I was always constrained.
Part 3. The Shingo Natsume protagonist. Nagara is in a way a character, you could say borrows, but also shares, various traits from the other protagonists from the other anime Shingo Natsume have directed, other than Space Dandy. He has incredible superpowers like Saitama, he's cold and drifts along the currents like Gene Otis, he's the one to solve various mysteries that occur within the narrative like Boogie Pop, and he often is unsure of himself as a youthful teenager like Watashi. Most of these characters actually share most of the traits with one another, which makes me feel that Natsume has a particular fondness for characters like this. I feel comfortable making this distinction because in reality, Shingo Natsume gets to choose if he wants to sign on to a project, so a certain amount of personal interest had to have motivated him to make those projects in the first place. They are a part of his oeuvre. What's neat is that I could be What's neat is that I could be watching One Punch Man from 2019 and connect with that disposition, and then watch Sonnyboy in 2023 and see those similarities, while also getting something completely different. It's a narrative that allows for genuine growth and intrigue in the characters of his works, but can also just be kind of funny. They are the anchors that allow the voices in the other parts of production to shine through, as no matter how insane some of the fights or plot twists are, you know that the protagonist is going to be there the whole way through, trying to make sense of it all with you. Part 4. It's episodic, baby. Now that I've highlighted the connective thread that exists within Natsume's works, I'd like to highlight another distinct aspect in all the shows he's directed, other than the Tatami Time Machine Blues, which is the episodic story structure. It's a little strange though to see that in anime this short, which you would think would have to make the most of their short runtime to tell a cohesive singular story. But Natsume is working in a medium with episodes, unlike a movie director or book author. It's something I actually really enjoy in his works because they make the most use out of the loose plot to spend time really fleshing out the characters and world. You see this in One Punch Man as the episodic structure is able to introduce these various villains and the hero society that leads into the climax, while also letting Saitama go shopping or frantically look for work. In Aqua 13, the episodic structure allows the individual parts of the island state to be explored, which play into the political world building when a rumored coup sweeps the nation that may or may not involve our resident man himself. The various worlds that Nagara and Co. go to explore in the anime expand upon the understanding of the universe in the anime, which eventually solidifies, allowing the ending of the show to even exist. And Boogie Pop adapts multiple light novels, so its episodic nature covers multiple self-contained volumes of a light novel series. The point I'm trying to make, without spoiling, is that the episodic structure is utilized with the intent of bringing out the best in these stories, which are often chapter by chapter manga adaptations in the case of Aqua 13 and One Punch Man. The exploration of the setting and characters doesn't need a centralized plot, so for the most part, it doesn't have one. Until you reach the end. I can't help but find similarities in Masaki Yuasa's The Tatami Galaxy, in how the episode structure introduces many of the characters you will be seeing and the town you will become acquainted with. Which is why the ending of that series is as impactful as it is, because of its ability to tie all these disparate elements of those seemingly aimless episodes into an extremely simple and earnest message that had me in tears when I first saw it. Which is why Natsume seems to incorporate a similar narrative structure to the shows he's worked on in following a tiny thread through a disparate episodic experience. It's something that I see he's done best in Sonnyboy, which is even more experimental and surreal than the Tatami Galaxy, but I think I made my bias clear. What's also clear is that I don't know how to wrap up videos, so I'll just say there's a lot I didn't cover because frankly, reading articles and passing them off as your own work is like massive scumbag behavior. But what I can say is that the sources I use are in the description, so feel free to learn more about this man and his incredible work. Also share this video to all your friends so that I can become a superstar like Shingo Natsume himself. Now I'm gonna go listen to either or because I have to edit a long ass video. Thanks for watching. Bye.